Oops. Hello and welcome back. I'm just seeing Socks in the background. He's helping out today with my with a reading roundup video. I've decided what I want to do because it's almost the end of May. I think by the time this goes out, it will be the end of May, and that's 5 months already. For those who know which order the months come in, unlike me, 5 months of the year already, quite a lot of reading done. And I wanted to pick out my favourites so far. What I'm going to do is limit myself to a book per month in terms of the favourites, so that my final list is manageable in terms of talking about it. And actually, when I look back at my reading list for the year so far, there's kind of half a page for each month so far, and each time it's pretty obvious there's one standout book in each month, so it's quite easy. I've just got to the end of this. I've raced to the end of this morning. This is the latest in our book club reads, although I thought we were discussing it next Monday, but we're still a month behind, having missed a month. So I'm ready there with 2 books read next Monday, and I'll be keen to talk about both because this is a really talky book. There's lots to talk about. This is The Couple at Number 9 by Claire Douglas. One of these dark blue with yellow font thrillers where usually the body of a woman is found and there's stuff in the past that you get in interleaved chapters from a point of view, an unusual point of view, usually commuted to the present day characters in the form of letters or recordings, or a flashback from somebody who's still just about alive in the present, something from the past escaping into the present and giving away terrible secrets. And this is almost a kind of classic example of the genre, with 2 bodies found under a patio in a cottage in wherever it is, down south somewhere, fancy, a nice village. And a young woman who inherits the cottage from her grandmother, and some suspicion that her grandmother with dementia might have been living there at the time that these murders took place. And the rest of the book is a kind of gradual unpicking of secrets from the past, and you get a crazy doctor and his son, stuff about artificial insemination, lesbians, and swapped identities, which I did kind of guess. As soon as people start talking about wigs and changing hairstyles, you think, aye, there's going to be some kind of swapped identity. These are all spoilers, by the way, so I should put that on the video before I start. There will be spoilers as I talk about this. And I did wonder about a certain plot point this morning. I read the last, third of it this morning. Hooked, completely hooked. I think it's a wonderfully written book, but there's something about that gave me pause for thought, where a lesbian couple go to see a doctor in the late 70s, and they talk about artificial insemination, and the doctor says, "Oh, I deal with lots of same-sex couples on this matter," and I don't believe it, really. I don't think that's quite right. Don't click my legs. He's jumped over and clicked my jeans. Scratching as if I'm a scratching post. I don't think people even said same-sex couples then. I think it was a much more savage and a world that didn't understand, really. I think people kid themselves. I think the world isn't as easy as that for gay people. I think now we live in a world of everything is wonderful and LGBTQ, rainbow, bright. But actually, it was only in about the year 2000 that people started behaving decently towards gay people. And I think there's something in this about a doctor who turns out to be, actually in the book, not a very nice character at all, being quite so understanding. Anyway, that's just a bugbear of mine. I think it's a kind of bit of social history that's gone awry somehow. Tell me what you think anyway. I don't know if anybody's read this. If anybody's read this, let me know what you thought of that plot point. There's a few contrivances at the end, but these kinds of novels always get a bit contrived towards the end as they race to make all the bits of information come clear, the puzzle come clear, really. Anyway, I enjoyed it thoroughly. I want to have book club about it so we can all talk about it, but we're still a book behind. Right, so my 5 months of the year so far. Look, Socks is really helping today. Here, I've read stacks this year, but it boils down to this basically so far. In order, I guess. And you'll have heard me talk about some of these before. John Ronson's The Psychopath Test is a non-fiction looking at what he calls the madness industry and prescription drugs and definitions of psychopathy, of madness, and how mental health stuff is the product of culture as anything else is. That people did sit down with a list of things that they thought were treatable sometime in the 70s. And it was kind of cobbled together, the things that we now take for granted. It's a really fascinating book. And I loved it. And I want to read more of him. In fact, yes, I've put some by. I've collected up things by him. And I will read some more. Then I read, at some point in February, a lovely, heartwarming romance novel, really, and a mystery novel, The Girl on the 88 Bus by Freya Sampson, the second novel I've read by her. And I'm doing my video. He's shouting up the stairs. I tell you, Jeremy's determined to get on these videos, like the cat is, like Panda seems to be. But he creeps up behind the stairs, shouting stuff. I'm going to carry on. Right, and so this I loved. Again, it's a mystery novel where it's slightly contrived. I mean, I guess these things always are, and it's how much you can hide the effect. Stuff that's hidden in the past about 20 years ago, gradually coming to light, and a few swift switches of character, of point of view, and the puzzle unlocking itself. Interestingly, both this and this are novels which in the afterword the writers describe as the thing they were doing during lockdown. That's very interesting. People being able to write during lockdown. How lucky to have commissions during that time so you could bury yourself in a fictional world while the rest of the world was panicking and worrying. A good way of hiding from that kind of panic of the pandemic was to have a project that you could work on just by yourself inside your own head or your laptop or whatever that was just yours. And Claire Douglas talks about setting her book in 2018, so it was pre-pandemic, and it was a kind of, suddenly became a golden, innocent age. I remember writing during lockdown as well. It took me a few months to get to it. I had deadlines and things. I did other projects, art projects, fan fiction projects, anything I could think of to keep me distracted during 2020. But once I was inside a novel, it was a relief to be doing that. So I know what all these two novelists are talking about. I wrote as Elsie Mason. I'm just looking for the books now. But it was a wedding for the Biscuit Factory Girls that I wrote in the summer of 2020. And it was a relief to go into a completely fictional world. The next one I wrote as Elsie Mason actually is set at the beginning inside a pandemic in 1919, following the end of the First World War. And that was the next year I wrote that. Anyway, so that was my February book, and because it's so kind of sweet and uplifting and life-affirming, that makes it sound soppy. I don't mean that. Life-affirming is a really important thing that novels do. And it was a good thing to read in February when the world is dark and kind of difficult. I think this was about the same time, February or March. Maybe that was March. Anyway, Adam Neville's Last Days, which is a very dark, spooky horror novel, but with very detective-y overtones. It's again about reaching into the past a few decades. This is back into the 70s and 80s, about cults, about hidden secrets. And it's a found footage novel. That wonderful genre that we have in horror films, he manages to do it. He makes it about documentary filmmaking. And I loved this. It goes a bit crazy in the end, as many horror novels do, as most horror novels do. You get the crazy phantasmagoria of the final battle at the end. And that's all right. That's just part of the genre. But yes, a great March read, or whenever it was, February. So it's good. I'm getting one for each genre. And then in April, this very serious novel for book club, The Glass Room, Simon Mower. And I thought it was going to be slightly too heavy. Maybe not the thing that I would enjoy, but I loved it. It's a kind of state of Europe novel covering the whole second half of the 20th century and moving around Europe, but at the heart of it, this glass house built by some fancy architect before the Second World War. And it's about immigration, about escaping, about fascists, about love affairs, lots and lots of love affairs, and surprising love affairs, and characters who end up living longer than you expect, people surviving despite everything into the world many years later, in different worlds, and having this weight of history behind them and this weight of secrets. And I just think this was beautifully written. It's very dense. It felt heavy. The font looked tiny. I was kind of resistant at first, and all the characters seemed so awful in some ways, but of course they're not. They're all wonderful. They're complicated, and they do bad things at times. I guess that's what makes it fascinating. There's some really horrible characters, of course, but in the end, again, it's another novel with lesbians at the heart of it. The lesbians hold the secrets in the middle of all these complicated relationships, and they have the strongest relationship of all, actually, even though they don't get to stay together in this. That's fascinating. And then in this month, May, it's a toss-up, but I think this wins it. It's The Little Penguin Bookshop by Joanna Toy, which is light and soapy, but full of wonderful characters, and you feel you're at the beginning of a series, hopefully a series, not just one or two, maybe going through the whole war with these characters who congregate around this railway station, and a family with people off at war, being an airman, being a prisoner of war. You've got lots of characters around the station. You've got Carrie in the middle of it, who has her bookish stall selling penguin books and magazines and things. So it ticks lots of boxes. It's a bookish saga. That's what it is. It's a historical saga novel, but with a bookish bent. And I loved it. At first, I thought, oh, maybe it's a bit too light and a bit too sweet. But it's just like a very hot, sweet cup of tea. That's what it is, which I was ready for in amidst some of these quite dark books, looking at them. Psychopaths, Nazis, Satanists. And then The Girl on the 88 Bus, that's a sweet novel. And so is this one, even in the midst of war. And then this is quite a dark thing as well. But those, I guess, are my top 5 so far this year. And that's really good, limiting myself to one a month, so I don't end up with a list of 45 at the end of the year and have to choose. Not that anybody's, it's not such a big deal, but I like having a nice list by the end of the year. These are my 10 or 12 or whatever favourites of the year. What's interesting is that, some of them are quite recent. 2 of them are very new, and the rest are me catching up from the last 10 years or so. So that's good. I feel like I've got a nice pile of things I can recommend. And it's the end of May. And June, I have to spend hopefully finishing this novel that I've been writing since January. I'm slightly, I've taken time off to write a Doctor Who thing. I'm slightly distant from that novel now. I've got to jump into it next week, reread everything and try and hammer out a plan for the last chunk and not make it feel too twisty and contrived and all the things that I can imagine doing, but making it dark enough and exciting enough. The end of a book has to be exciting, whatever the genre, I think. Because, as I know, the reader wants to sit there with the last 50 pages and wants to not be able to put the book down for the last 50 pages. Like exactly the reaction I had this morning reading Claire Douglas. Like the idea that someone's going to stop you reading is the worst thing in the world. That's the effect you want to have on people. And it is that silly old phrase, I couldn't put it down, isn't it? That thing that everybody says about books they love. The opposite of that is the phrase that I remember my step-grandmother, Renee, saying years ago, I couldn't get into it. And when I was a kid, I knew exactly what she meant about beginning a book and feeling that the book was fending you off. It wasn't inviting you in. And that was an interesting phrase for me. And I started thinking about the books that you can get into and the books that keep you trapped all the way through. So from a very early age, I was thinking about what that meant. I couldn't get into it and I couldn't put it down. And the importance of those terms. Because you know how that feels. You know the books that you have to force yourself to read for whatever reason, obligation or whatever. Whether it's for work or a book club or because somebody's given you it or because for whatever reason. You know, sometimes you do have to push yourself. But when a book is really on your wavelength or when you're on its wavelength, it's no effort at all. And as I said before, it's like the physical book itself just melts away and you experience the pure story of it. And that could be fiction or non-fiction. They're all about storytelling. And at its best, that's something that you just get immersed in. It's like swimming or something. Anyway, I'm going to stop for today and go and get some lunch. Do subscribe and like and let me know what your top 5 books of the year so far are. Maybe you haven't got that many yet. Maybe it's been a really good year for reading so far. But let me know, and let me know whether, actually I'm interested to know whether it's the new things coming out or older things that take a while to catch up with you, like me and The Glass Room or the John Ronson book or Adam Neville. Some of these have been sitting on my shelves for years. It's not the new and shiny things that actually hit home a lot of the time. Although I am pleased to have 2 new things on my list. They're books that didn't get hype. I mean, a certain amount of hype. Obviously, books don't get through to shops and into your hands without an awful lot of hype. But some books are hyped more than others. I'm pleased to say I've stopped falling for hype and chasing after things that other people are liking. I have done that in the past. been seduced by the shiny covers and shiny ideas that soon dulled. Right, I am going to go. That's 20 minutes of blether. Socks, you're going to have to move from my lap. Okay, see you again soon. I will see you again in the next episode. Goodbye.